Do me a favor, everybody. Give the video a like, a thumbs up, like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, follow us different places around the internet at BIDWKB. This story we brought you here first on the platform back in 2021 is when it was. It was August. And An'Twan Gilmore was a young man who was behind the wheel of his car at the intersection of New York Avenue and Florida Avenue in Northeast DC. It's a very heavily traveled intersection. About 3 a.m., other drivers called the police because they noticed that a young man who turned out to be An'Twan had fallen asleep behind the wheel. And he was just sleeping behind the driver's seat with his foot on the brake. Police arrived at the scene, and when police approached him, officers had their body cams rolling. And they approached him. I believe they was several officers deep, encircling the vehicle with their shields up and everything. And when they awakened An'Twan, first of all, they could see that he had a gun in his waistband, right? His hand was not on the gun. To be clear, he wasn't pointing the gun. He didn't have his hand on the gun. They just saw a gun, right? And unfortunately, sometimes that's all it takes. So when officers approached him, they saw a gun, and An'Twan was awakened, and he was startled. So he took his foot off the brake. The car lurched forward, and you could see he didn't know what the fuck was going on. So he was trying to leave. So as soon as the car accelerated slightly or moved forward slightly, one officer opened fire, firing 10 shots. I believe 7 of these shots went into An'Twan, and he died. There was a number of protests in the city after An'Twan Gilmore was killed because, again, he was a sleeping man behind a vehicle. He was not threatening officers in any way. There's no reason the officers should have feared for their life, and yet one officer decided to open fire. I want us to actually take a look from this show back in 2021. And we're going to see some protest footage that was captured by justice journalist Chuck Modiano. Shout out to Chuck Modiano. We've been friends with Chuck Modiano around these parts for a minute. And Chuck was on the scene speaking to An'Twan Gilmore's family members as they were demanding for charges to be brought, which, might I add, they were not immediately brought, but eventually they were. So let's take a look back to 2021. The compilation of videos, guys, they were already in the streets last night for An'Twan Gilmore. Shout out to DMV Black Lives in the city. Shout out to Shutdown DC. Shout out to Good Trouble Co-op. They had the folks already out. And of course, Chuck Modiano was on the scene, and he had the opportunity to speak with members of An'Twan Gilmore's family. Let's take a look at that.
An'Twan Gilmore, from his family, from his community, that are taking so many people from us. Are we going to stand by and let it happen? No! Are we going to fight this racist police today? Or do we got to say his name? Say his name! An'Twan Gilmore! Say his name! An'Twan Gilmore!
Say lost for words. We're lost for words. We're going to keep his memory alive, his name alive. We want accountability. We want them to be held accountable. We're going to keep our foot on their neck. We're not letting up. My cousin's life meant something. He meant something. They didn't even know if he had any medical distress or any medical history. The only ambulance you seen was in the camera back there. When the young lady was recording, when she actually said, let me go back around, she had a gut feeling, let me go back around, because she felt something. And just from her response, my cousin was asleep in the car. They were playing chicken hide and go seek. They were trying to figure out what they wanted to do. They had their eyes on my cousin. They wanted my cousin for what? I don't know. He was a good man. But at the end of the day, you're going to be held accountable. His life meant something, and 10 shots was not right. 10 shots with the man who didn't threaten you at all. And if your body cam, the officer didn't say not one time his hands was on the gun. The officer said, let me get more light so I can see his hands. Oh, he's waking up, he's waking up. Not one time did he say he pointed the gun or his hands was on the gun. So no, our feet are on your neck, and we're not letting up, and justice will be served for An'Twan Gilmore, a.k.a. Model Baby, a.k.a. Juvie. Love you, cuz.
stupid man. Fuck out here.
Of course, outstanding journalism right there by Chuck Modiano, justice journalist here in DC. Guys, follow Chuck Modi if you haven't not already on the good social medias, because especially when it comes to actions in DC, Chuck is always down there, and I like the fact. So, just to give you an idea how long that this situation has been going on, that was August of 2021. Here we are now, knocking on March of 2024. So it took 2 years for charges to be announced against the cop that murdered An'Twan Gilmore. This officer, Jevric, he was a sergeant from DC's 5th District Metropolitan Police. Again, the only officer on the scene to shoot his gun at a sleeping person. So the update is that he was facing, the cop that is, was facing second-degree murder charges, and now the cop has decided to take a plea. Will, let's take a look at the reporting from WUSA 9.
Again, with a brand new guilty plea from a D.C. police officer. Good evening, I'm Leslie Foster. That MPD sergeant is charged with shooting and killing 27-year-old An'Twan Gilmore. Investigators say Gilmore had been sleeping in a car moments before his death back in 2021. People in the community held protests to demand justice in the days that followed. Adam Longo walks us through the guilty plea just tonight and how Gilmore's family is feeling.
So this is a story that we have followed closely for more than 2 years now. Perhaps you'll remember this officer-worn body camera footage. It captured the shooting death of 27-year-old An'Twan Gilmore. MPD Sergeant Enis Jevric fired 10 shots at the vehicle. This was August of 2021. Now, the U.S. Attorney for D.C. announcing Friday night that Jevric has pled guilty to 2 charges: involuntary manslaughter and violation of constitutional rights by excessive force. Now, the shooting happened around 3 o'clock in the morning, August 25th, 2021. Officers called out to the intersection of New York Avenue and Florida Avenue in Northeast for reports of a man either sleeping or passed out in a car. So police on the scene here, they get spooked because they see that the man inside of the car has a gun. A knock on the window, Gilmore wakes up, the car rolls forward a little bit, stops, then rolls forward again, and Jevric opens fire. Now, he was the only officer to shoot. Nearly 2 years later, March of 2023 now, prosecutors charge him with second-degree murder. And that decision was applauded at the time by An'Twan Gilmore's family. They remembered him as a beautiful person who was influential in his family's lives. But in today's plea hearing, according to the Washington Post, Gilmore's sister told the court that, quote, some justice is better than no justice, but some justice is no justice at all. The U.S. Attorney's Office says Jevric will be sentenced in July. He will continue to remain out of jail until then. He is facing a minimum of 6 years on both counts.
So shameful that this plea was accepted. This man committed second-degree murder, right? And to be clear, I ain't no judge, I ain't no lawyer, I ain't no juror, I ain't none of that. I ain't no defense attorney, I ain't none of that. But that's murder. That's not involuntary manslaughter. This person, this officer, made an intentional decision to discharge his weapon at somebody that, number one, he knew moments prior had been dead asleep. Pardon the phrase, but this man was in a deep sleep. You know how sleep you got to be to fall asleep with your foot on the brake? Pretty fucking sleep, right? Sleep or passed out. We will never actually know, right? But sleep. Unconscious, right? Not aware of what was happening around him, but at the same time, not posing a danger to anybody. I tell you guys, I've told this so many times, simply Black people being in possession of a gun or having a gun in proximity for some reason is reason enough for cops to fear for their life. When actual white people, actual whites detained or attempted to be arrested by cops will literally point guns at the fucking cops, and the cops will somehow find a way not to murder them, find a way not to kill them. It's incredible, though not accidental. I am not certain, as you heard from the reporter there quoting An'Twan Gilmore's family member, who was quoted in the Washington Post, who said that some justice is better than no justice at all, but some justice is actually not justice. And for this cop to only be facing maximum of 6 years on each count, my guess is that when he goes back for sentencing, by the way, this police has been free as a bird free as a fucking bird. To my knowledge, he has not lost his job. There may be some information out there to contradict that. I am not aware that this officer has been relieved of duty. But then again, there's been so many cops, particularly in the DC, Maryland area, Northern Virginia too, but DC and Prince George's County for certain have blamed on so many people in recent years. I have a tendency to get these things confused, but he still remains free. The cop, that is. He is not awaiting sentencing in a jail cell. So he's getting to enjoy his freedom. As the privileges continue to be extended for killer cops, they get all the freedoms that most people charged with similar crimes are not afforded. And if we're talking about a max of 12 years, I have a feeling that the judge is probably going to sentence him to 6 years or something like that. But the for each count or something to that extent. But the sentences are going to be served concurrently with, 4 years suspended, all these accommodations made for killer cops. Recent weeks have found the Washington, D.C. City Council passing a crime bill which gives police, in fact, more freedoms, more abilities to do things like pursue quote suspects in car chases through the city, which I don't think they were previously allowed to do. Um, this officer Jevric is going to be the third to plead guilty in connection to a murder of a citizen was on duty in as many years. For here last year, two cops who were convicted on second-degree murder charges in connection to a young man that they chased on a moped, who ended up getting into a fatal accident and dying, Karan Hilton Brown. But all that was through the fault and the actions and the conduct of the cops, and those cops were found guilty criminally. I don't think that those cops have been yet sentenced, and I think they still remain free until sentencing. So I don't think that this is justice at all. I think this was second degree murder. I think a jury in DC would have convicted this cop of that. And I think it was very cowardly of the DC state's attorney to accept this plea of involuntary manslaughter. And I just wanted to bring you guys this update. I try to keep y'all apprised of stories. I don't just like to bring you a story and that's it. I just talked about the story that one time. No. This was a story that affected the community here. This was a year and some change after the murder of George Floyd. And the city, as I imagine most cities around the country, was still very raw as the police were continuing to kill Black people after the murder of George Floyd. So, you guys, I wish we could tap into that same anger energy that we saw in those protest scenes. I wish we could activate that more frequently than only after somebody is murdered by the state, right? And maybe that kind of energy only comes out in those circumstances, but I'm not sure if that's the truth. I think that that kind of energy can be mobilized on a regular basis because our condition continues to be very, very poorly out here, right? Not just for oppressed people in this country, obviously, still seeing what's happening to people in Palestine and then throughout the region there and then in the global south, like, oppressed people got it a little tough out here. So if we can muster that kind of forceful rage, um, when people have not been murdered, but I guess people are always getting murdered. They may not always be getting murdered here by the state, even though it seems that they are, but they're definitely getting murdered by other states, other places. So we just wanted to send continued solidarity to the Gilmore family. I'm still so very deeply sorry that this young man was stolen from his people in this way by the state. I hope that a civil suit is forthcoming if it is not already pending. The city needs to compensate Antoine's family for stealing him and even monetary compensation is not going to be enough because ultimately they want their family member back. They don't want a check. They want their fucking family member back. 10 million, 20 million, that shit don't bring An'Twan back. But since we can be compensated and we do need compensation for the trauma and for the absence of this individual, I hope the Gilmore family absolutely gets that.